Let's do it. All right, guys, we are going to be doing a little video here. We're going to try and keep this one shorter than the last few because it is not really as complex a topic to talk about. It's Innovation's Terran vs. Zerg. We call him the Machine. And it's because he does the same shit over and over again. This series is a fantastic example of that. He wins this series 3-1 versus Rogue. He does a very similar build most games. Gas first, Hellion Pressure combined with a Liberator into a third command center, extra barracks, double upgrades, and then he just does a very standard double medevac, clears up creep, gets out tanks off one siege tank, and then pushes with 2-2 with about 7 siege tanks. So he builds a siege tank very early to keep him safe from counterattacks, and then just keeps on non-stop producing siege tanks. So because he's building them so early, he still gets a pretty good tank count off one factory. But as we saw in Innovation Series vs. Serral, if his opponent takes out all of his tanks, he's kind of just stuck on mass bio because he goes for lots and lots of reactors. He goes 3 extra barracks rather than a second factory or starport, and he kind of relies on his momentum and his tempo to carry him through. He delays his 4th base a long time. He wants to win on 3 base. He wants to win in the mid game, and if the Zerg manages to crush one big fight, generally he just gets wrecked. He runs out of steam. It's a pretty straightforward style though, and he does the exact same thing, or a very similar thing, almost every game, which is why I really like it. And I think it's something which is good to learn from, you know. Tastosis always talk about the idea of like, oh, if you want to learn from someone, this is the guy to watch. And it's because he does the same thing over and over again. It's very solid. Now, the argument against playing like Innovation is that, well, if you're doing very solid play, it's very high level, you've got to execute it well. You're not giving yourself many opportunities in the early game with these little poking pressures, Hellions, a Liberator, to do crazy damage. Often, against Zerg especially, up to a pretty decent level, it can be argued that you're better off hitting something with a firmer timing that's going to punish a greedy Zerg. Something like a Cyclone Hellbat timing. Something like a fast Hellbat medevac timing. And anything that really puts a bit more pressure on. So this is much more of a lighter pressure, where if your opponent's very greedy, and you don't kind of micro it quite right, you can get shut down. Speaking of getting shut down, Liberator only kills a single queen, and the Lings get a pretty good wraparound on these Hellions. Oh, 4 of them are still alive, but more Lings popping just in time, and even though the micro here is pretty decent, we're going to see, I believe only a couple of workers will go down in total. So yeah, only 2 Hellions left. Great splits by Rogue. Ends up getting 4 kills in total. Doesn't really slow down Rogue too much there. And we see 70 supply Zerg to 44 supply Terran. And you're kind of like, oh man, this doesn't look too great. And that's what can happen with this opening. That's what can happen is if your opponent's, you know, good on the defense, it can be a little bit messy. I would argue most of the time you're much better off sending that Liberator to the main. Obviously this was a bit of a meta sort of adjustment. By Innovation here, where is that Liberator? He says, look, let's go for the 3rd, because my Hellions are going to pull the queens down. He's going to know there's a chance I go in the main. As you can see, Rogue's well prepared. Rogue doesn't have a Spore at that base. And, you know, this could have worked out a lot better, but Rogue immediately pulls these queens up. And the Lings are well positioned as well. Wasn't quite a Serral spread on the Zerglings, but still pretty decent. Still pretty decent. Yeah. So good defense there. Potentially, if that Liberator kept flying through, sieged up on the back of here, could have been a real dick. It could have moved like here and sieged on the backside, and then once everything's being dealt with, it could unsiege, rotate to the main, could have done more damage there for sure. But but yeah, that could be good. So guys, please don't spam caps. I'm relying on all of you to ask questions. I don't know if someone's being a dick or what's happened. But yeah, let's... Say what?
People are doing good. They're just trolling me with questions.
Okay, people are just trolling. No worries. Yeah, you guys ask as many questions as you want because I'm relying on you all to steer discussion. Plox is on call with me. He's nice enough to grab some of those questions as we go. There's going to be natural lulls in me explaining things. So anyways, so that's the opening pressure. It's a very flexible pressure. You will see some games. Innovation will recognize, oh, look, there's too many units ready, and he'll just pull out with aliens. Pull out, poke in, pull out, poke in, pull out, leave them alive. If you lose them all, the Zerg gets a lot of freedom. And watch the minimap on 8 times speed now. It takes a while until these 2 medevacs come out. This is with innovation macro. He's going to get those medevacs moving out at 6:30 with 16 Marines. Creep's already expanded to cover a large portion of the map. And Rogue also gets a Ling counter in. And this game just goes haywire really quickly. So this was game 1 of the series, by the way. And yeah. You kind of clear creep with these 16 Marines. Non-stop tanks. Notice, as I said, 3 more barracks rather than extra tech structures. And normally your idea is to just slow down the creep, and then as 2-2 gets to about 3/4 of the way finished, you should have a really nice push prepared. So about now, you're like, cool, let's go, Marines and tanks, let's unsiege, bring everyone out, let's push. Rogue's like, lol, I'm waiting for this. At the same time, Innovation a bit too slow on a pickup in the middle of the map, loses a bunch of Marines to Banelings, very sloppy for a player of Innovation's caliber. These medevacs coming back do actually spot the Ling Bane coming down, but already this is slowing down Innovation's push. This is making things a little bit awkward for him. These rocks even go down, just making things awkward. There's Lings in the 3rd base, forcing SCVs off the line. And this all comes back to just kind of the early freedom Rogue had after shutting down the first pressure. So, push is going to come down, more Ling counters are going to spill in. Innovation's like, let me fight you, you dickhead. He's had a 2-2 advantage against just 1-1 upgrades for a while, but now +2 carapace is finished and +2 melee is almost done. At this point, Rogue is very happy to just sacrifice his own 4th because he's got a gold base. He's like, I'm still up on 4 bases and you're now on 2 bases. Guess what? That upgrade advantage is about to disappear. Oh, your tanks aren't sieged? I don't even need to wait for my +2 melee or my ultras. Look, these Banelings can come in and get some decent detonations. Now, you might be like, oh, Banelings on tanks is bad. Most fucking silly comment that people always say way too much. There are times where Banelings on tanks aren't good. This is an exception to that general rule. Number 1, in this style, as I said earlier, Innovation's tanks are the absolute core of his style. If he loses all his tanks, he's fucked. He can't replace these. If the Ling Bane count gets knocked down low enough, it's kind of okay because he's got Liberators to deal with Ultras, plus a little bit of Marauder production, and just the Marine count can kind of overwhelm if his splits are good enough and he's not too deep on creep. But in this scenario, we're going to see, of course, the fact that, hey, these tanks are really clumped, and the fact that siege tank friendly fire is going to come in. These Banelings, if they get to there, are going to be hitting 3 to 4 tanks. Not just that, the siege tanks. This tank is going to be shooting these 2 tanks. This tank might land a Baneling hit like there and splash those tanks. And we see friendly fire plus Banelings, all the tanks are pretty much gone. There's 2 on red hit points that are left. So definitely you're happy to roll a stack of Banelings into siege tanks if they're that clumped up, for sure. You know, it's different between that and if it's 1 siege tank on its own and you're running 12 Banelings in it to kill it. You're like, okay, that's a little bit silly. So from here, Innovation's like, fuck, I gotta keep the fighting going. My 3rd had to lift, like I gotta do something. He tries to lift in the main, realizes he can't do it. He's like, you know what, we'll do this kind of elevator push. I'll unload some units on the low ground, some on the high ground. He tries to make the best of a bad situation. And Rogue says, Dicktown, New Jersey. You heard of it? Time to go on a trip. Takes him there, knocks him out. Inno's dead. One last desperate push. It's just going to get rolled. Counterattacks roll in. He's trying to do what he can with drops, but Rogue's all over it. Rogue also, I love this move, by the way, these spotting fucking Zerglings that players are starting to use more and more. I've like on and off used these over the years, but it's never been something I consistently remember to do. Rogue, Serral, and a few of the other top Zergs are doing this more and more consistently lately. It's very cool to see. And I think this will be GG. Any good questions?
We were talking about how the early Hellions died and Zerg kind of just drone up and grow out of control. In this map, the natural is pretty choked up, so wouldn't it be better to like, let me rephrase that. Isn't it a bit inefficient or like kind of risky to try and dive to kill drones on this map since it's so easy to wall off your natural and surround the Zerglings? And
exactly. Yeah.
So yeah, people were asking about that where it's like, well, since he lost all the Hellions, isn't that really bad? Because now he can't clear creep because the 16 Marines are pretty delayed, and by that point, Zerg is just able to deflect everything by that.
For for sure. I think that's a good point. So let's go back to that. And this is something where there's no particular right or wrong answer. So I talked about how, well, generically, if you're doing this on the ladder, 100% you don't do it this way. You run a Liberator into the main. This is such an exposed mineral line. And if you're watching that lib as well, you can dodge around this spore. Like, this spore is perfectly placed by Rogue for a Liberator. But even if you just fly past to the left, you take 1 or 2 shots and you siege up like a circle like that. Oh, brutal, man. That's so good. Or you can do it on the right-hand side. Come in here and siege up that way. But then it's easier for the queens to work around you. And then your Hellions poke in on the third, where it's wide open. You can dive in, kill some drones, pull back. And it's like a much lower risk move. Because you can run to here with your Hellions, and you can easily get out if you see Zerglings coming. So that would be the standard way you do this. But what you've got to understand is that pro players will always operate on percentages, right? And they'll change things up because there's a mini metagame that goes on. So it's not just you do this build, I do this build. I counter your strategy with this, but it's also how you use these strategies. So Innovation says you're going to be super prepared up here with your Zerglings to stop the Hellions, and your queens and spores to stop the lib in the main. So I'm going to rotate and do the last thing you'd expect, which is Hellions running up your natural ramp, Liberator sieging the third. So it's the unexpected nature of this which makes it work. If we're not playing Rogue, and we're not Innovation, and we don't have their own history of playing this build against each other many times, it's very, very straightforward. It's very simple. It's 100%. Liberator hits the main, that's always going to be the best. Hellions hit the third. Wider open area, lower risk, mineral line's nice and exposed. You're going to be able to do better that way. So I think that's a really good question. And it's something Innovation will vary how he does this pressure as he does this throughout the series, 100%. And that's only natural. So just to rehash the build very quickly, let's talk about the build order really quickly and give you guys the cliff notes. It's a very simple build order. It was gas first, build the reactor after the Reaper. Actually, let's double check something. So even though he went gas first, I don't think Innovation scouts in this game. But he goes Marine after Reaper, doesn't he? That's a bit weird. Does he? You want to go Reactor first. Okay, he does go Reactor first. Yeah. Okay, so small thing. Well, because he doesn't SCV scout, he's worried about pull first. So the Reaper goes and checks, sees if there's any Zerglings coming in from the side, and he leaves the Reaper at home until the command center finishes, in case early Zerglings come across. So he knows here, he says, oh, 2 minutes 40. If they haven't showed up, they're not going to show up. Maybe you want to be a little bit safer, wait to 2:45, and then he goes across. So this gives up his ability to pressure with the Reaper immediately. However, he can still, at this point, go across the map, check for the third, and be like, oh, that's cool, we'll join up with the Hellions. And with a gas first, your 2 Hellions will get over to the other side of the map before Ling Speed is done. Assuming your opponent's go on Hatchery first. So he's just here, he's like, yeah, you can't sneak any Lings out. The Hellions, the Reaper, can just try and start denying creep very early. And this is a very important part of his play, which if you're not as high level, obviously you're not going to put as much APM into, right? Slowing down creep, looking to get free damage on the queens. Why? Because those queens, if your Reaper's in front, they'll automatically attack the Reaper. The Reaper can heal out of combat. So you can come in, do damage to a queen, pull back. If they're good though, they'll focus fire the Hellions because the Hellions don't heal themselves. So there's like a whole mini game that goes on here where he goes to snipe that tumor. Rogue cancelled the tumor, so it gets refunded. He's going to wait until the queens are down there to protect it, and then he'll respread the tumor. At the lower level, you might just find once every minute you have a little bit of spare APM, you go in, if there's an active tumor, you kill it, and then you go back. You're not going to be able to keep as much constant focus on this as Innovation does, and you shouldn't try to. You should do this to your own level of mechanics. You shouldn't be like Innovation where he's constantly looking at these units and he's going in, he's going out, he's going in, he's going out. You kind of fit that in without compromising your macro. Innovation can do this constantly without compromising his macro because he's a god. So, you go straight into factory, you build 6 Hellions, you go straight into starport as soon as the factory's done. Barracks goes off and builds a tech lab. It did squeeze out a single, or actually is it 2? Well, a single Marine, then it builds a tech lab. You build a single Liberator, the Viking just chills, factory swaps off and builds itself a tech lab. Obviously during this, non-stop depot production from about 38 supply. And you go 3rd command center. And then you go 3 barracks and then double engineering bay. So 2nd barracks goes down in that reactor. This reactor here is going to be for the 3rd barracks, so he'll put a 3rd barracks down here. He's busy microing right now, which is why he's slow on that. Even Innovation is not perfect. There we go. See, so he builds it there. He's going to swap those over. And double engineering bay goes down as well. And now the starport can swap itself off and build a reactor. Innovation just did what we call the pig, where he thought his starport had already landed and he clicked down here to set the rally point to the front. and he cancelled his own reactor building. So we call that the pig. It's a great maneuver. It's really fucking bad if you don't realize that you've done this. And he goes, what the fuck? Innovation, what are you doing? And he's like, quick, I need those medevacs out real soon, man. And then he starts building the reactor. I do that all the time, man. It's a fucking terrible habit. But yeah, even Innovation does make these little mistakes, right? And it's more common you'll see these mistakes in games he loses like this one. So anyway, stim, shields after that, your 3 barracks, you got your double upgrades. Now, you should be able to get 2 medevacs and about 16 marines out, and move those out by about 6:30 if you're Innovation. Maybe if you're in Gold League, you do this at 8 minutes 30. Armory goes down so that he can line up 2-2 very nicely. It's very important he starts 2-2 the moment 1-1 finishes. And then he's going to add his 4th and 5th barracks to go up to 5 racks. Now, some games he'll add a tech lab on one of these. Other games he'll just go 2 reactors. 2 reactors is the standard. And he's also going to add more reactors, at least 1 more reactor on these last 3 barracks. Now, some games, oh my god, yeah, he actually goes 7 reactors this game, doesn't he? Oh, no, just, yeah, okay, it's the standard 6 reactors. So he eventually adds these 3 barracks, and it's just a crazy reinforce of bio. Now, you could do the exact same opening, and you could just go second factory instead of these 3 extra barracks. Delay the 2 extra barracks a bit longer, and go both tech labs. In that case, you've got more tank production to last longer into the mid-game, especially against Hydra Bane. You've also got more Marauder production, which is going to give you more meatiness. Now, in this scenario, it's not against Hydra Bane. It's just straight to Ultras off Ling Bane, which is kind of good against siege tanks. If you're going double siege tank production, obviously tanks aren't the most ideal versus mass Ling Bane. They're much better for dealing with Hydras. So that's kind of an interesting thing here, where maybe Innovation is going more for this mass barracks play because it's a little bit more generic. I feel like he doesn't really know if he's going up against a Hydra play or not, because Hydras come into the game somewhat late at pro level. You're more focused on Ling Bane, and the Hydras are more of a supporting unit. And he seems to focus on this even when he plays Serral, when he is playing Hydra Bane every game. So it's something where Innovation just seems to favor this style at the moment. He likes the heavier Marine Marauder count. Always does that 2-2 push as I talked about. And it's just the most straightforward build, and he's going to repeat it again and again. So let's look at some of the other replays where he actually wins games with it. That was the only game he lost in the series, the first game. Have we got any other questions or thoughts, my man Plox?
Not really.
Oh,
just
shit.
as a question, like, why did tanks beat Hydras? I'm dumb, but why do they beat Hydras and not Ling Bane?
I like these questions. These are good. There's no such thing as a dumb question. Only dumb people who are too afraid to ask questions, right?
That's me.
That's my catchphrase. Well, you just asked the question, so you just put yourself out of that category. So basically, Hydras, one of their big strengths is they can just kind of maintain a concave and a position, right? So if we think about it, when you're engaging against Ling Bane, you're spreading your bio backwards. You're spreading as much as possible, so the Banelings have minimal effect, right? So against Ling Bane, you just want to be spread out as much as possible. They have to come to you. Widow Mines become amazing versus Ling Bane or Ling Bane Muta, right? Because they've got to run into your close range, right? You can stim backwards, bait them into Widow Mines. You can spread backwards. You can have an endless spread. However, if they add Hydras to that combination, Hydras outrange Marines. They're the same range as Marauders. They outrange Widow Mines, right? So Widow Mines become bad, but not just that. If your bio is just spread really far, they can come at you with a concave of 10, 12 Hydras or 16 Hydras, and they'll start killing your Marines and Marauders. You've only got 5 or 6 Marines and Marauders, or 10 Marines and Marauders fighting them at a time. So you need to then stim your units and bring some of your more Marine Marauder forward to actually make sure that fight is even or in your favor. But then Banelings can come forward. So basically, if the Zerg can just force this dance where you're like, let's go, let's push forward, and the Zerg comes forward to the Hydras, so you go forward, and then the Banelings come forward, and you're like, shit, split backwards, and then he just disengages. And you're like, okay, let's push forward. Fuck, there's Banelings, spread backwards, the Banelings are disengaging, the Hydras are still engaging. You won't see this because no one plays pure bio, but if you saw someone play pure bio or bio mine, and they were just frontal pushing rather than multi-pronging, you would actually see this dance where the Terran takes minutes to move like a single screen's distance through the Zerg player. Like, he just cannot get through the Hydra Bane because the Hydra Bane can just keep pulling into really nice defensive arcs with the Hydras coming in. Whenever the Terran actually clumps up enough to overwhelm those Hydras, and bio overwhelms pure Hydra very easily, the Banelings come in and fuck that equation up for the Terran. So Siege tanks add ranged artillery, where you're just like, no, every time you go in and out, you're taking big siege tank shots. You're going to get fucked, right? And this is why we often see a different sort of micro, right? Oh my god, let's do fucking Weatherman. Let's do it. This is my favorite way of explaining concepts in the most messy, shitty way possible, but I find it kind of funny because it looks stupid. So let's do that. So normally against just Ling Bane, right? You'll be like, derp, derp, derp. These are my tanks, and your bio will just kind of spread. Like, you want to be spread, right? And that's great. That's ideal. You just want to be spread out. But if they come in with Hydras, what we often see lately is tanks are actually a little bit more clumped, right? Rather than being spread out so much, you might have like tanks here, tanks here, tanks here, tanks here. They're much more clumped in close to each other, and we often even see this thing where you'll see like tank, 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 creating almost a wall, right? Say there's a ramp here, and they'll leave just a little gap here, and there might be another tank there, another tank. You still want a bit of spread for dealing with the Ling Bane, right? But what we'll often see is the Terran actually clumps up their bio ball rather than spreading against Hydra Bane. And this is why where things sometimes go terribly wrong. And sometimes go terribly right. And what they'll do is they want the bio, if the Hydra Bane comes in, they want to like stim this bio all in a big ball, and they want to just stim at the Hydra Bane and stutter step backwards. So they will actually move forward that way towards the Hydra Bane attack that's coming in towards them. Oops. So this is the Hydra Bane attack coming from that way. But then they'll also stutter step backwards, and they'll actually pull back behind the tanks. So the tanks form a bit of a wall. This is also why you see armor upgrades, and you'll see Innovation do this when he's playing against Hydra Bane. He'll go armor. If you're playing against roaches, you'll go attack on your vehicles. And they'll actually use their siege tanks as a bit of a wall for the Ling Bane to crash up against. And the tanks are going to do really good, and they sort of protect, and they allow all your Marines and Marauders to be shooting at once, and you're focusing on just having so much firepower that the Hydras aren't worth their weight, right? Hydras are good when their battles are drawn out, and they're doing this back and forth dance we talked about. But as soon as the siege tanks get in range of a base and force the Zerg to attack, if the Terran can combine all their firepower and basically say, look, you've invested in so many Hydras, you have a lot less Ling Bane. Because of that, I'm going to be able to just gun down the front-running Ling Bane, and they're just going to filter in and die, and the Hydras come in and just go like, oh shit, it's too late. And this is what we've seen lately, is a lot of Zergs dying to this. And that's why when we see Serral fight, he comes in from 3 sides and he says, this here is Dicktown. So if you can stop the Zerg getting ready, if you can stop the Zerg preparing and getting that surround and push in hard enough and fast enough, it can be really good. But as the fights get very big, it's very dangerous to have your entire force clumped like that. And this is the problem I see. A lot of players, they see pros microing like this and they try to do it, and a Baneling flank just crashes in and kills all their bio. So that's one of the big problems players are having at the moment, is they're trying to do this micro and they're not quick enough on the starter step, or they're getting flanked, or they're getting surrounded. And we saw it backfire when Innovation played against Serral, where he was doing this micro and like this fucking 3-sided Baneling Hydra flank would come in, and he's like, fuck, my bio's all balled up. And he'd either have an option. He'd try to stand and fight, but he wouldn't quite have the firepower because the units would be coming in from all sides. The tank splash wouldn't be doing enough. And the Banelings would connect with his Marines. And when I was doing that show, there was someone in chat who was like, Pig, I remember in Wings of Liberty and Heart of the Swarm, players were a lot better at splitting. They were never letting Banelings connect with clumped up Marines. Are the players worse now? And I was like, no. Innovation has been winning championships for 6 years. It's a different style of micro he's going for, where it's a little bit more high risk, high reward. And he was getting punished by it for Serral, because Serral was always just good enough with his engagements to overwhelm. In other fights, what often happened was Innovation would he'd have tank set up here, and he'd have his bio here ready to pull back this way, but then Ling Bane would come from there, and he'd be like, fuck! And he'd have to just stutter step his Marines, or almost straight up run, barely even stutter step, to up this area and pick up and evacuate, and his tanks would just get killed because he's running away from these Ling Bane flanks. So, yeah. So it's actually really interesting to just kind of see how this played out in different games and scenarios, and how that kind of worked out and went together. Wiedemans, thank you so much for the 31 viewer host, my man. Appreciate that. Hope you had a good stream. Hopefully you inflicted some disgusting cannon rushes on people. Is there a Protoss equivalent of Lingbane Hydra, says War Machine? I think War Machine's asking, is there a generic comp you can do as Protoss? Yeah, it's called Immortal Chargelot Archon. As Terran, it's Marine, Marauder, Medevac, Siege Tank, or Liberator, depending whichever one you prefer, right? These are like the generic compositions that you can just kind of go for in every matchup. It's always good to focus on those generic compositions when you start out. Okay, guys, so this is looking kind of familiar. Is it not? This is the exact same opening. Innovation the Machine doing the same thing repeatedly? Who would have ever thought? But we're watching from his camera this time. Notice he's being a lot safer with the Hellions, and this time he still came in from the third with those Hellions. But he's rotated, and this is what I talked about, how in that last game, remember I said he should have rotated to the natural with the Liberator. He's done that this time. He's learned from his last game. He said, cool, let's do it. And then he pulled that Liberator back just before that spawn finished. So he's just killed 8 drones, but not just that, he's preserved the Hellions and the Reapers, which forces more units out, slows down creep. Check this out, by the way. Look at that. What are those red lines? He has shift-clicked. So whenever you're diving in and you catch the Zerg with your pants down, Innovation has just caught Rogue with his pants down. Now, whenever he did this against Serral, Serral's Lings would split ahead of time. They would already be spread out in a bit of an arc where you can't get the splash. But he sees them clumped up and he's like, oh, fuck you. If he A moves, his Hellions are going to attack the Queen. They're going to attack the drone. But if he can dive in here and he can get just 1 or 2 volleys on this while they're clumped, just one volley, he'll kill most of those Lings, and then he can dive in and start killing all the workers. So Innovation seeing this, and I do this very occasionally as well when I'm actually on the ball. I'm usually not on the ball, but when I am. And he's just clicked on a Zergling and shift-clicked on another Zergling saying, attack those Zerglings. So these Hellions will just automatically try and attack these Lings. Now, is he going to land the volley? You can see Rogue's like, split, 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 split. If Rogue wasn't quite so good at splitting so quickly, then they would have all been roasted. But Innovation is just going to, I think he's just going to pull back anyway, because check this out. So what's going to happen is they're like, cool, we've spread, we've created the net of Zerglings where your splash damage is ineffective. What he should do though is he should just pull back. He can use this choke to his advantage. Yeah, so he'll just pull back a little bit there. Oh, he fucked up a little bit. This Hellion got isolated. But he's still got a few too many Hellions here, I think. Oh, and then, yeah, now he's going to try and push forward. Let that splash damage do its work. So whenever, what you can do is if they're spread, you can run backwards, and if they chase you, they will naturally clump up. Now at high level, he knows Rogue's not going to keep chasing him, so he turned and fought straight away because he really wanted to get some more damage done. At the same time, he's queued up the Liberator there. He's killed 2 drones, and he almost gets another Queen. Doesn't quite get it, but there we go. Oh my god, another 4 drones. Remember, he killed a bunch of drones. I think it was 8 drones earlier, and now he's killed 4 and a bunch of Lings, and he's forced a ton more Zerglings. So this game, it's a totally different scenario. Remember last time it was like 40 supply to 70, 75 or some shit like that? This time it's very equal supply. He's created a lot more damage. Did he need to go in with the Hellions and live there? No. He could have just chilled if he wanted to. But he was like, these units won't be that useful later on. And you know what? This time his medevacs are on time as well because he didn't accidentally fuck up that reactor liftoff. Also, I thought this might be the case. His upgrades are a little bit late because he was microing so hard. I think that's why those upgrades are late. So, depending on where your upgrades are, ideally you will afford the 4th and 5th barracks before Armory. In the last game, his upgrades were very well timed and he didn't have the money, so he went Armory first. Because when this gets to about 3/4 of the way done, 2/3, 3/4 with the upgrades, somewhere around there. So when that bar gets to about here, you want to make sure you have your Armory started so you can start 2-2. But he's gone 4th and 5th barracks this game, and we'll see that Armory start right about now. Yeah, right on time. Beautiful. Once again, going 4 reactors. So as I said, you want to move out about 6:30, sometimes earlier, with the 16 Marines, the 2 medevacs, and this is just risk-free. I'm being a dick. I'm going to clear up stuff, see if I can do some damage, and just pick up. Nice stutter step there. Very ballsy taking that engagement. A lot of players would have just picked up there and backed off, but he's really trying to get some nice damage. And he's just creating threat with this. If you're not as high level as Innovation, once again, you're not going to do as much with this. You're going to focus more on your macro, your spending. But you can see he's kind of doing this. He's got tank spread. It's the exact same format. We're going to see 3 more barracks go down because you see he's got minerals floating now. So he's going to put 3 more barracks down. There we go. Just when he gets that money. And this time he's done a lot more with his opening pressure. His 16 Marines have been very focused on this area of the map because this is where he wants to push, either through there or up here with his siege tanks later on. And now he moves out with another drop. So if you're not ready to push just yet, and you can see his 2-2 being a bit late this game, he's not. you can go either group up 4 medevacs and about 30, 36 Marines or however many it is. I'm good at maths. 32 Marines. With those medevacs, or you can do a split clearing like this, where the one group you're not watching just pulls back to a very safe location. The other one goes in, clears creep, and then you just tell it to drop back somewhere like that. And then you can send the other one in, clear some creep. It's a good way to keep the Zerg busy, keep the creep back, stop it from getting too far out of control if you're not ready to push just yet. But if you're not quite as high level as Inno, you'd probably just immediately go for the 2-2 push a little bit earlier than this anyway. And we see here, sets up his siege tanks. Once again, no Hydras being built out of Rogue. Tries to go for a Ling counter. Inno's like, I don't care, I'm ready for you. Another Ling counter tries to go down. 4th base is dying. Rogue is trying to counterattack and expand elsewhere. And this time you can see the upgrades are late, so we didn't actually have an upgrade advantage through this, but the upgrades are still almost identically timed. Wow, Inno with the F2, but Rogue with the F2 as well? Or, no, he's just said, like, Rogue was wrecking that, but I think Rogue was like, fuck, I need to break this army. Innovation was pushing in too hard. Tries to break it, can't quite do it. Innovation takes him down. Clean, crisp, and simple. That was a clean game. GG's.
How is this different from what Cyril does? Because, like, it's kind of a repeating theme that Innovation tries to win with this 7 siege tank, 2-2 push, I kill you or I die in late game. So what is it that Cyril did that got the surrounds that are really, really good, but Rogue somehow didn't?
You know, it's all the tiny details, right? So one, what I would argue is a problem is Rogue going double Evo at 4 minutes 10 in this game. This is just fucking silly. This is Rogue saying last game was pretty clean. Let's go crazy fast upgrades again. I can get away with this. Against any Hellion opening, going for upgrades this fast is really bad. Now, what does that actually cost you? It costs you a lot of minerals, but not just that. He's also had to put back on gas very early. In fact, I think he might have even like left. Like, let's check. When did he? So he left one worker mining gas, and I think he puts back on about 315, 320 to get that much gas at that moment. Let's check. Maybe he waits till the full 330. Yeah, okay, it's like 327, 328. Fair enough. Just a little bit early. But yeah, putting all the minerals and gas into those Evos and the double upgrades straight away against Hellions is very risky. Against a 2-on-1 or a build where they've gone 3 command centers and you've scouted it, you know they don't have a starport. They've just got 4 to 6 Hellions. That's not something which is very flexible. In this case, you know it's a starport opening. What's the risk? Well, a Liberator can hit you, a Medevac can hit you, Banshees could hit you, a Viking can start clearing up Overlords and then follow up with a Hellion drop. There's a lot of different things, right? And the Wall-Off doesn't necessarily help you that much either against Hellions. You know, your Zerglings still have to be the net. We saw those Hellions were still a problem, and you're much better off. Often people say, oh, but the Hellions get me if I don't build these Evos. Especially if you're at Rogue's level, 2 Evolution Chambers is a fuckload of money. That's 250 gas, plus the 2 drones that aren't mining for this entire duration. They could be mining a ton more minerals. What is that? 5 pairs of Zerglings. That's 10 extra Zerglings. You could have 10 extra Zerglings. That's going to make defending these Hellions deep on creep so easy. Not just that, there could be more Queens. Notice there's only 6 Queens for Rogue with this defense. Usually with this style of play, a sort of rule of 1 gas, which this indeed is, you'd be wanting to go for 7 or even 8 Queens. Because that's going to help you say, oh cool, I can send 2 Queens to deal with the Lib, and I can still have, you know, 3, maybe even a 4th Queen at the front defending the Hellions. Not just that, Cyril is very good at changing what his Queens do. Rogue is a little bit more set in saying, oh, these are injecting Queens, and whilst he does end up bringing that Queen down as more of a defense Queen, fucks that up. That was greedy. That was way greedy. Should have just pulled the drones away and accepted the losses. But yeah, an extra Queen, an extra few Zerglings would have made his life easier, especially if you're not Rogue. But look, he doesn't even get to use the upgrades because he's so busy trying to build extra Queens and Lings now and rebuild his drones. It's just a bit risky. You don't need your upgrades that fast. He could have built these upgrades at 5 minutes and he'd still be starting his upgrades in line with Innovation's upgrades. So he could have built them a minute later and he would have been fine. So Evo Chambers are too fast. If he got away with it, it would have looked like a really godlike move because his 2-2 would have been brutally fast and he would have been able to run over his opponent. It's just a risky move. It doesn't give you flexibility. I always prefer someone to go a few more Queens, a few more Zerglings to make sure they can shut down the aggression and drone that 3rd base up a little bit quicker. If you secure a 3rd mineral line quickly, it allows you to get a faster 4th. More creep, more macro hatches, more zerglings, more banelings, which Rogue's entire style is based around Ling Bane. So I understand why he wants the fast upgrades. I just think he pushed it a little bit too quick. Other than that, he's also just a little bit sloppier with his defense. Serral often made Liberators just look kind of weak. He like let's go back. It's just little things here. Okay, so here, Rogue's setup is pretty good. These Overlords could be slightly further out, I would argue, but he's got an Overlord at front spotting the Hellions. He's got this Overlord here, but he doesn't actually react quick enough. So if we go to Rogue's vision, which we're on right now, so that Queen only gets one hit off there. Okay, that's fine, but this Queen was a little bit slow, and it should have been hitting it the whole time. He could have got a lot more damage on that, and then he could have moved out of there. He also could have detached a second Queen to this location, or this Queen. Actually, maybe that could even be in... I don't think that's in range. No, there's no way that's in range. You're an idiot, Jared. Yeah. He basically just should have pulled drones away, realizing, fuck, I gotta wait for the spore to finish. Instead, he loses that Queen without doing much damage to the lib, loses a bunch of drones, and he loses some drones on the third at the same time. Those Queens probably should have been slightly further forward intercepting the Hellions. The Lings should have been up there to try and punish him if he dived into that third mineral line, but being ready to reposition to block the natural if he goes for there. And if this Liberator was more heavily damaged and he, after injecting with that Queen, had said, I know this is a threatening area, what you can do is you can go inject, shift, right-click, and that Queen will automatically kill that Liberator when it comes into siege up. He doesn't do that, so he takes even more damage here. All that damage piles up, so he's simply behind in this game and ends up in a much harder position than game one. GG's. All right, we'll hop in the next game real quickly here. What's going on in chat, Blocks, or in your own mind? Any good discussion? Any good questions going on?
I'm not seeing anything, unfortunately.
No worries, guys. Just a reminder, you can ask any questions you want there in chat. A big part of that is gonna steer this discussion and allow me to kind of cover some of the topics I'm otherwise just not gonna remember to talk about.
Someone asked, would it be worth it to not sack your Hellions for drone kills, instead kind of keep them as a run-by defense squad as Hellbats?
I don't think... Yeah, I think just putting a bunker at your third or whatever is good, but Hellbats are good with your army as well. Like they're not useless later on. Having Hellbats with your army is good. Yeah, you could leave them as like a bit of a running around the map, clearing up the map squad as well. Or I guess you could put Hellbats defending the third. They'd be pretty decent at it. If you have like a Hellbat, because I see the question he's saying, put them in the minerals at the base. That's like a cute idea. Like your third, you got like a Hellbat here on hold position. So even if they roll Banelings in, they're only going to hit one Hellbat, and the other one's still going to be really good defensive. That's like a cute little way to defend. You could totally do that. I think that's a cool thing. Nothing wrong with doing that at all. Hamburger, please, says Nicholas Beer. What you talking about, buddy? You want a hamburger? Let's take a slice off my ass. Get some of that pig meat. Space Opera, thanks to the Twitch Prime sub, dude. Appreciate it. Is this going on YouTube? Of course. Of course. I'll be putting that up tonight, guys. Absolutely. Or tomorrow. All of the GSL vs. the World kind of pig daily analyses shows we're doing are being put up on YouTube for sure.
So, what's the difference between trying to play Ling Bane versus Ling Bane Hydra? Like, what is the stylistic choice? What does one accomplish that the other does not?
It's interesting, right? Because I think Ling Bane, you can swarm a little bit more, and you can just have more money in counterattack. So something we see Rogue do in this series is constantly counterattack, right? He's always got this Ling Bane counterattacking. And we haven't really seen him swarm over the top too much, but the idea is that you can threaten a huge counterattack, do a bit of damage, or like if they're ready for the counter, your Ling Bane's mobile. So it's the same thing we saw when we looked at Serral's ZvT as well, even though he does it with Hydra Bane, but you can do it even more so. A counterattack of Ling Bane is so mobile and so quick. Oh wow, my camera froze. That's hilarious. Yeah, I'll try to fix that up, guys. But a counterattack of that's hilarious. Oh my god, that looks so weird, doesn't it?
Oh, keep it.
That's so funny. That looks so fucking weird, man. Holy shit. Okay, yeah, we're gonna leave that. We're gonna leave that. I don't even want to fix that. That's great. Anyway, Lingbane is so mobile it can smoothly swap from a counter attack into an aggressive force, or into a defensive force. So you can threaten a counter, force a lot of units at home, and then quickly bring that home and use it as a flanking army to fall in on the back of your opponent's force. And I think it might even be a special thing where Rogue's like, I know Innovation plays this style every game. This is going to be better against the way he plays. Because he doesn't... If I can get one big, massive Ling Bane engage where I just kill all the tanks coming in from both sides, if I can have more Zerglings than normal, because Zerglings are very good at just closing the distance with tanks, right? So as long as you get enough flanks or enough angles to close quickly with the tanks, Lings with some Baneling support is the best composition for just getting on top of a tank army. And we know Innovation plays one factory, so he actually can't afford to replace those tanks, right? It takes him forever to replace them. Not just that, but we're going to go fast ultras as well, right, with the Hive. Now, why is that useful and important? Great Evo block, by the way, very cute. Why is that important? Because Innovation is playing 6 reactor. He only has 2 tech labs. He can't build a lot of Marauders. He can't make a very easy Ghost transition. So Ultras are very good versus Marines. Their counter is Marauders and then also Ghosts, which need Tech Lab Barracks. He's only got 2 Tech Lab Barracks with this build. That's why it doesn't work out so well. So this time around, Innovation just got shut down, kind of. He did build a second Liberator this time, but you notice he looked down there and he was like, fuck, my first Lib just floated into a Spore. God damn it. God damn it. He's like, shit, this is not how it was meant to go. The Evo block delayed as hell. That's getting in by a few seconds. Ugh. Ugh. Brutal. That's my face when I'm flanking you with Zerg. That's me saying, yeah, I'm about to explode in your army's rear. Yeah, for sure, guys, for sure. So anyway, he's going to keep bouncing around with the Liberator. This time he changed it up. Once again, same opening. Very small adjustment. He said, okay, we're going to do the exact same transition. We're going to converge in the same spot, but I've squeezed an armory in and one more Liberator. Didn't really pay off this game just yet, but he's being very dogged with this second Lib, and he's like, I will find some damage. I will be annoying. Bit of a screw up by Rogue to not really have a Queen on the edge. Like, a Spore on its own does not defend this. That Queen needs to be over there. Rogue, get your Queen! He's got 2 Spores and he's still taking damage to it. Rogie! Rogue did screw up pretty royally this game. Rogue had a really nice position after he first held. But he then takes damage. And he then decides to go range upgrades and go Mass Roach Muta, which is about the worst thing you could possibly do. So here's a good example of Innovation. His pressure didn't work out. This is a hard map against Zerg to find damage. So he decided, let's commit more, see if I can catch Rogue off guard. He really did not find the damage he wanted. But he found a little bit of follow-up damage, which was very cute. He's like looking for a... Oh, don't tell me. Oh my god, there's a hole. Can he reach? Oh! That Liberator! So sick. He also, I think, realizes, yeah, he's not in a great position here. But luckily, it's like Mass Roach, which are really bad units later in the game, into a really late Muta swap, which are also not the best unit on such a turtley map where it's easy to defend, especially when they come in so late in the game, right? So yeah, the Mutas aren't really going to find a lot of purchase, and Innovation's going to play a bit more turtley because he knows there's Mass Roach, and against Mass Roach you don't need to do the damage as much. Now, I was talking earlier about upgrades on tanks, but Pig, Innovation isn't getting tank upgrades. Yeah, that's because when he plays a multiple factory style, him and all the other Terrans will get those upgrades I was talking about. But because he's doing this mass barrack style with the extra reactors and just a crazy stream of Marine Marauder, it's a little bit different. So at this point, Rogue has said, cool, I invested in all these roaches. The first 5 or 6 that defended the Hellbats were great. The next 30 of them or 20 of them have done nothing. Maybe I'll make some Ravages because, oh, I also don't have Baneling speed ready. I forgot my Baneling speed / this is just a terrible transition. Innovation said in his interview he thought Rogue was afraid of him playing mech, and that's why he made too many roaches and lost this game, even though he was in a really good position and Innovation should have lost. Rogue just fucked up. That's Innovation being very, very frank in his interviews, but yeah, you see Rogue here finally actually ambushes Innovation and catches the tanks unsieged, so a bit overeager from Innovation. But there's just not many Banelings left because he ran all his Banelings in pre-Baneling speed, which is a terrible, terrible engagement. So Rogue, he played a bit of a sloppy game here. His early defense was pristine. He then kind of got a bit of unnecessary damage from the Lib. Did a really shitty transition into Mutas. If he went Hydraling Bane, if he went Puling Bane, any of that would have been good. But Rogue lately he's been having a few moments where I think it's because he's so confident against her. This is my theory, and I don't know, because I don't know Rogue personally, right? He doesn't speak much English. I don't speak any Korean. My theory is he's so good, sometimes he thinks, yeah, I should just win from here, and he just makes dumb mistakes because he gets kind of cocky, or he like takes the position for granted. I kind of get why he took that engagement there. He had to get rid of the tanks, but with no reserve Banelings, he's now going to die. Needs Banelings here. The Roaches and Ravages are a pretty appallingly bad unit. Marines and Marauders can just stim their way through that. And as we talked about, the Reinforce is insane. And Innovation pushes through. So guys, I'm going to finish up the show now, as we've got some coaching lined up in just well, actually right now. Student, if you're watching, shoot me a message on Discord. We'll meet up in a second. Questions? What else are we talking about? Any good questions, Blocks? What's been going on?
So people were asking about the difference between what Innovation does and two factory tank, and whether that's, can you do the same type of push with two factories, or does it somehow become weaker and yet your value is more towards the late game?
I think one of the advantages of this style is, I'm going to fix this camera because it's fucking freaking me out as well right now. I think I'll just unplug it, plug it back in. I think that's probably the best way to do that. Give me 1 second, dudes. See if that decides to reinitialize at all, or if it's just gonna be derpy. Okay, so I think I might need to add a new camera source to fix that up. Sorry, it's so tilting looking at my own face, guys. I'm like, what the hell? There we go. Why is that not in the right resolution? That makes no sense. Always does this. Okay. Oh my god. Okay. So we should finish up the VOD real quickly. Let me just... I'll fix this camera really quickly, guys. We'll get back to answering questions for a minute. Okay, and then we'll do the same thing here. That face is still on this fucking scene. Jesus Christ, that thing's freaking me out, man. And... Video capture device, add existing. That camera right there. On the in-game, I'm normally in the bottom right, yeah? I think I am. Yeah, about there.
You
Something
are.
like that. Guess like there. Okay, so now we can add a green screen filter. .440, and that can be about 60. It's normally the right settings. Cool. Isn't that amazing? All right, let's put my headphones back on. So guys, what's the difference of the two factory style and this style? So the two factory style isn't quite as all in, especially against Hydra Bane. You can reproduce tanks. We've even seen some very occasional three factory styles. And what's really cool about the way that works is the third factory or the second factory allows you to just keep reproducing tanks. You can keep trading. You can lose a fight and you can still get that tank count back up. And especially against a Zerg who sits on Hydra Bane on lair tech for a long time, it gives you a lot more longevity. The weakness of that style is tanks are such a bedrock to your playstyle. Vipers are a big problem. You need to be very careful when you're doing these later tank pushes where Hive's out to spread the tanks super carefully. Innovation kind of bypasses that by saying, no, I'm just going to have more Marines and Marauders. Marines and Marauders don't really care about blinding cut. They can just run through it or run backwards out of it, whichever way they want to go. Liberators as well are going to be very good against Ultras, whereas tanks are a little bit less mobile for setting up quick pushes against Ultra-based armies. BioLib can kind of jump in, instantly siege the libs and kind of go from there. So is it good? Is it bad? It's just different styles. They're all legitimate in their own way. I personally prefer the multiple factory style. I find my games stall out on lair tech for a bit more. I like to have more tank production. But definitely this is its own style, which gives you just such a crazy Marine Marauder reinforce. You've just got so much bio coming out, and it also gives you a bit more strength against counterattacks, I find. So a big Ling counterattack is nowhere near as deadly when you're building 12 Marines at a time. It takes you so little time to get 30 Marines at your natural wall after moving out. 50 Lings can come in, you've got 30 Marines there, and they're just like, stim, gun them down. Whereas when you're building lots of tanks get wrecked by counterattacks a little bit more and that sort of stuff. You have a bit less mobility. So those are the main points with the difference between the styles. Innovation, really enjoyed this one. The final game, which I'm not showing, was very similar. He got a decent little bit of damage done with his pressure. He followed up with some pushes, defended some counterattacks, and just kind of exploded in to finish the series off 3-1. Is it the best style of all time? Do I think, oh, this is going to break the meta? No. But I think it's a really interesting style because it's very flexible with the Hellion Lib. It creates a lot of threat whilst also being quite safe because you get that very fast tank behind it and a fast third command center. So if you like to play big 3-base macro games, but still do a very decisive push, pushing out the 7 tanks, the 2-2, the massive bio. This is a good style to play. I think it's a good style to practice with, have some fun with. Any last questions, Mr. Ploxy? Any good questions in there?
So innovation's the Kanye West, fuck you, pay me sort of play.
Sorry, say what?
So Kanye West, innovation's the sort of like, fuck you, I'm going to kill you on 2-2. And
yeah.
2 factories just, I'm going to take this game and beat you over minutes and minutes and minutes of play.
Yeah, I would think so. I mean, you still sometimes just win with like the 7 or 8, or often it becomes like a 9 or 10 tank push if they don't deal with it quickly enough when you're doing 2-fact. But yeah, essentially it's a very similar, push that can sometimes win the game. But with this one, you're very much like, just, yep. We're winning on 3-base. You'll see some players play 2 or 3 factory and they've like got a 4th base going down before they go past 5 barracks because they're like, yeah, we're gonna go to ghosts if it goes that late. Like we're gonna keep pushing this game deeper and play a more careful style. Wants to get out there. He wants to bring the fight to the Zerg. Hallucinogen, welcome to the Pigsty. Thanks for the tier 1 sub. What are your thoughts for late game in these fights? Is the Zerg just going for a few ultras with some large Bane flanks the best way to go? I'd say it's been a pretty even game. What are Zerg's best transition options? It really just depends on your style, Debin. I think, honestly, for most players, just winning on lair tech and setting up your engages better is great, but ultras are fantastic as long as they don't have a really good Marauder or Liberator count. So if they're Marine heavy, like Innovation is, ultras are fantastic. Getting Adrenal, getting 3-3 is great. I think with Hydra Bane, against this sort of style, you actually just want to make sure you win those Hydra Bane fights. If your opponent has a high tank count, Vipers are incredible. Against that style, Innovation does, Infestors might actually be the better spellcaster. So if someone's like really bio heavy, not as heavy on the tech units, then your Abducts, your Blinding Clowns won't be as good. So it's better to do it that way. Just scrolling up here. Yeah, we fixed the webcam. And cool. Any last questions that you see in there, Plox?
Nope. Everything seems good.
Fantastic. All right, I think this was a good show. We kept this one a bit shorter, guys. Great little style there. I really like the build. More importantly, I just like the rhythm. And you do this even if you're doing a 2-factory style. There's the same sort of thing as you create what pressure you can in the early game. As you go into 3-base, you're pushing out with the first 2 medevacs and 16 Marines. Hitting that at a decent timing and not fucking up your macro is very key there. It's a big thing I focus on in my play. Clear up that creep, because if you don't get those 2 medevacs across, you often see a Zerg just like, I have no units. I'm going to build 85 drones. I'm going to spread creep for like minutes with nothing distracting me, nothing slowing me down, and then I'm going to make Hydra Bane. And if you don't do these little bits of pressure to slow down the creep and to create some threat, Zerg can feel bullshit. But all these little pieces together can be amazing. I love the success of the Liberator recently in Terran vs. Zerg at pro level because it's a fantastic unit, and I also have a lot of success with it. I think it's one of the harder units for Zerg to deal with. It's one of the easier units for you to micro, as opposed to a Banshee, which is much harder to kind of focus down drones without running it into a spore and getting it killed. Thanks for hanging out, guys. Appreciate the support. Catch you guys next time.